Everyone, and welcome into Coach Craig's Sports. This is the MLB DFS Core Pick video, Core Pick live stream for today, Friday, June 23rd. So the way I'm going to structure today's video, we're not going to have a recap since I talked about a little bit more of the slate in totality yesterday. It was a pretty profitable day yesterday, so hopefully it was the same for you guys in general. But without that being said, we're going to start off with some weather reports, kind of walk through the 10-game main slate in terms of that. Go over to FanDuel, talk about my core picks for the day. If you're joining for the very first time, go over one pitcher, four hitters, go a lot in past history, a little bit of recent history there as well. Kind of talk about why I like them in general. Don't necessarily have to play all five together. Obviously, stacks will play a major part if you're playing in GPPs and everything else like that. And then last but not least, go over to the bottom half of my cheat sheet and talk about the top GPP teams to stack for today overall. That cheat sheet is 100% free. It is up on Facebook. It's up on Twitter. It's up on the YouTube community tab. Also up on Patreon with some more in-depth notes. Small monthly donation over there for the Patreon at patreon.com/CoachCraigSport. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely be sure to check that out as well. But without further ado, we'll get started with a little bit of this weather report. A couple games that could be affected by weather today. So we have the 10-game main slate, first of all. Looks like about 4 games could potentially have rain. Not sure that any will be majorly affected at this point in time. We'll keep an eye out on that throughout the day. If anything does majorly change, we'll list that down in the comments below. So we have Seattle and Baltimore. So Baltimore, 73% chance of rain at this point in time. A lot of East Coast games, it seems like, are the ones with chance of rain today. So we got Texas and New York. So that game has 43% chance of rain out in New York. Philadelphia and the New York Mets, 70% chance in Philadelphia. And then as we move down, Milwaukee and Cleveland, 60% chance of rain. Those are the 4 with chances of rain at this point in time today. Maybe a potential delay. We'll keep an eye out on that, like I already mentioned. Throughout the day, if anything does majorly change, if it doesn't look like these games are going to go off for whatever reason, we'll list that down in the comments below. But with that being said, I'm going to stop getting off that screen. We'll go over to FanDuel and talk about the core picks that I do have for today. It's kind of an interesting slate today. I think there's a lot of different options that you can mix and match overall today. So it's going to make for a pretty interesting slate. About 4 or 5 pitchers today that I would consider, but ultimately ended up on Shane Bieber as kind of the most safest, most consistent one, if that makes sense, for today. Just in general, on $9,600, averaging about 30 fantasy points per game. Obviously, this is one of those games that could have a chance of rain. If that game unfortunately gets rained out, postponed, it looks like it's going to get rained out or anything else like that, probably want to switch over to like a Joe Musgrove or a Chris Bassett. Those would be the other 2 that ended up in my cheat sheet that I do feel pretty strongly about today as well. So Bieber on the season, like I said, averaging about 30 fantasy points per game. He's $9,600. Not a bad price tag there. Not a lot of high-end guys today. Logan Webb and Lucas Giolito are above him. Kodai Senga as well at $9,900. So $10,200 or less for starting pitching today. A lot of guys that are in a similar trajectory, similar type of projection. So do like Bieber here today. He's going against the Milwaukee Brewers, who have been striking out at a pretty good clip this season. Bieber, there was a couple starts where he wasn't getting quite as many strikeouts, but the last 2 he's had at least 5 in, pitched at least 7 innings in those 2 starts too. Last one gave up 5 earned runs, so that's not something we're looking for. A little bit of hit or miss more than we're used to with him this season, but still looks like a pretty safe and consistent play against the Spurs team. Doesn't have a long list of history versus them, but it is some pretty decent history in the limited sample size. Then as we keep moving down, we're going to first base with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He's $3,000, averaging just under 10 fantasy points per game. Quite a pay down spot for him at this point in time. Been a little bit slower as of late for one reason or another. 1 for 3 versus James Caprillion, who is pitching for the Oakland A's today. So a little bit of history there. Not too much to write home about there, but it's more of a play on the price tag at $3,000 today. 275 average, 9 home runs, 42 RBIs, averaging almost 10 fantasy points per game on the season. You'll see as of late, he's been down a little bit. So this is more of a upside play than anything. Hasn't really had that big game in quite some time. So I understand if you don't want to play him, might be a little bit popular today with the cheaper price tag and everything else like that, but still is a guy that I would consider very much versus Caprillion today. Then at second base, ultimately ended up on Brandon Drury here. You could play him at first base too as well. He's up to $3,600 because of that Coors price boost today. 6 for 14 with 1 home run in his career versus Kyle Freeland. So some pretty good history at that. Guy that's been doing pretty well so far to start the season. So averaging about 10 fantasy points, $3,600. Like I said, you get that Coors price boost, 267 average, 12 home runs, 37 RBIs at this point in time. You know, he's a guy that can spike some pretty good upside going at Coors Field. We see, what was this? Yeah, multi-hit games in 5 out of 6 games until the most recent game where he went 0 for 4. So a guy that's had some pretty decent history in recent games. So not anybody that we should be very concerned of. There's going to be a little bit of downside, but the upside is still going to be very great at the very same time. Then we're going to keep moving down. We got Manny Machado, $2,900. I was kind of between him and Matt Chapman here at this third base spot. Manny Machado has the longer history in his pitcher versus hitter matchup, but Chapman does have a home run versus Caprillion as well. So if you're going with the Blue Jay stack, Chapman plus Vladimir Guerrero Jr. are going to make a lot of sense together, mixing and matching some other pieces there as well. But Manny Machado, had that slow start to the season, hitting 258 at this point in time, 9 home runs, 32 RBIs, averaging just over 9.5 fantasy points per game, $2,900. And he is 7 for 18 in his career with 1 home run versus Patrick Corbin. So some pretty good history there at that. And has really been kind of starting to turn around as of late. Obviously, 2 multi-hit games in the past 2 games. He's got a hitting streak in the last 6 games. And then there was an 0 for in between there. So 9 of the last 10 games, he's got a hit at the very least. And some multi-hit games in recent history. That good history versus Patrick Corbin, who's been one of the lesser pitchers in all of baseball the past couple seasons. So it should be a pretty favorable matchup for him and the San Diego Padres today. And then last but not least, we're going with the cheap option in the outfield, Nelson Cruz. This is also very much dependent on him actually starting today, which I assume will be the case, but you never know. So make sure we're paying attention to that Padres starting lineup. Otherwise, there's some other cheap outfielders there that we can definitely look at today. Jake McCarthy's another one, 5 for 10 in his matchup in his career versus, I can't remember who they're going against at this point in time. Logan Webb, I think it is. But Nelson Cruz, 235 average, 5 home runs, 20 RBIs on the season, 6.6 in terms of fantasy points per game, $2,300. Not the greatest numbers when you're looking at it, but he is a part-time player at this point in his career. He's obviously an older player. You can only DH at this point in time too as well, but he is 3 for 5 with 1 home run in his career versus Patrick Corbin. So some decent history at that. And when you look at some of his more recent games, they've been pretty good in general. You see a home run a couple games ago, 2 RBIs his last game that he did end up starting, which looks like yesterday. 0 for 2 before that. But like I said, a part-time player at this point in his career, a guy that does offer some pretty decent upside, especially from home run potential, especially in a good matchup versus Patrick Corbin. So if you want a cheap option, if you're playing that Padres stack, it does make some sense to mix him in as long as he is ultimately in that starting lineup. And, speaking of starting lineups, I will post those down in the comments below throughout the day. So definitely be sure you're checking up there as we get closer to lock. In terms of core plays, if you go with these 5 players that I do have listed here, you got $13,600 remaining. $3,400 per player. So a good amount of room to either pay up for a couple different options, make a balanced build, just depending on how you want to build it out. Obviously, we got players from 3 different teams here. So if you want to stack a couple of these teams together, definitely makes some sense. All 3 of those teams are in my stacks for today, which we're going to close out of FanDuel and go over to YouTube and talk about right here. So I'm going to bring up the YouTube community tab over on YouTube. While I'm doing that too, if you guys have any specific questions related to MLB DFS, be sure to leave them down in the comments. Leave them in the live chat if you're watching live at this point in time. But this is the bottom half of the cheat sheet and the top GPP teams to stack for today. I am going to mention the Texas Rangers. When I was doing my research last night and early this morning, looked like Clark Schmidt was going to pitch for the Yankees. Rangers have pretty good history versus him. Looks like it's going to be Luis Severino though today. Severino has really struggled so far this year, so still like the Rangers to a decent bit. A little bit more limited history there, a little bit more hit or miss history than it was versus Clark Schmidt, but still should be a pretty good opportunity there. A lot of that's going to come down to ownership and everything else like that though. And then Toronto Blue Jays are a team I'm very much interested in today going against Caprillion. They're probably going to be a pretty popular team. Like I said, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at the cheaper price tag. Matt Chapman at $2,900 looking pretty good as well. Alejandro Kirk is 2 for 3 versus him. He obviously struggled so far this season, but could be a guy to mix and match in there as long as he ends up starting. A couple other different plays that you can mix and match there too as well. I believe Lou Bichette's dealing with a little bit of an injury at this point in time, so maybe his ownership will be down. If he ends up starting, you could still mix him in as well. And then not even last, but not least, we get over to the Angels, who are going against Kyle Freeland. Some pretty good history versus him in the past. Brandon Drury is kind of the main beneficiary of that. Some guys haven't faced him quite as much, but obviously you get the Coors the Coors Field price tag bump on that game too. So Shohei Ohtani's like all the way up to $5,000. Going to be a little bit more tough to play him today, but maybe that reduces his ownership by quite a bit. Obviously, going to be an interesting day to see how people approach this in general, with some of those guys getting up there in price tag. And then last but not least, we have the San Diego Padres going against Patrick Corbin. Some pretty decent history there in the past too. So you can talk about Manny Machado, Nelson Cruz. I'd mix in some Juan Soto, some Fernando Tatis Jr. as well. A lot of different ways that we can approach that. Ha-Seong Kim's a guy that I do have in my cheat sheet as, $2,600 second base, third base option. Makes a lot of sense on today's slate, especially if you're going with the Padres stack. And then obviously Trent Grisham's been playing a little bit better as of late. So he's been a guy that I've highlighted in my cheat sheet in my core picks a couple of times this week. So definitely like him as a potential stack option as well, as long as he's in that starting lineup for the Padres. But with that being said, that's pretty much what I do have at this point in time. As always, if you guys have any questions related to MLB DFS, be sure to drop them down in the comments. Also, be sure to let me know your favorite play down there as well. Definitely interested in hear what you guys have to say, whether someone from my core 5 picks, whether someone from my top stacks, my cheat sheet, or whether it's a completely different player you guys think I missed. Definitely interested in hearing who that is for you today. And then with that being said, if you're checking out this video for the very first time, first of all, welcome in. Do appreciate you having you check it out. Excuse me. Definitely appreciate that. If you are brand new or have yet to subscribe to the channel, feel free to do so. Definitely helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports. With that being said, it's helps to build the community that over here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's focused on you, the viewer, helping you with the MLB DFS and USFL DFS at this point in time. USFL DFS video will be out later this week. MLB DFS Monday through Friday. In terms of the core pick videos, the cheat sheets, and everything else like that. Also, be sure to look out for my MLB prop of the day. So far, since I've been doing that, 3-0. So definitely some good success there. Be sure to get signed up on Prize Picks, Parlay Play, and BetUS. All that information is down in the description below. I will list up the prop bet of the day down in the comments there. I'll list it up on Twitter. I'll list it up on Facebook. So definitely be sure you get on that today, because we've had some pretty good luck so far since I started doing this. But with that being said, definitely do appreciate each and every one of you tuning in today, whether you're watching live or on replay. Definitely means a lot to me. Hopefully each and every one of you have a great rest of your day and some pretty good luck in MLB DFS tonight.